Today you're gonna learn a melodic galloping metal riff, and it's gonna sound just like this. Alright guys, we're going to dive right into this melodic galloping metal riff. This is going to be real cool to play, by the way, because you're integrating that galloping technique, that really quick back and forth alternate picking snappy technique. But as you heard, we're going to be integrating some really melodic sounding power chords in here. It just makes the riff really cool and really fun to play. Now, two things real quick before we get started. If you're a Patreon supporter, then you will get the backing tracks and the guitar tabs for this lesson. If you're not on my Patreon, there's a link in the description of this video. Second thing is hang around till the end of the video because we're going to have just a little tone talk, and I'm going to share the reason why you saw me playing a different guitar for the intro here, and then I'm playing this guitar for the lesson. I'll tell you why. Alright, so I'm going to play through this riff one more time out in the open here, and then we'll break it down piece by piece. Alright, so there are four parts to this riff, and I'll break these down piece by piece. Actually, the first three parts are very similar in nature with the galloping part of it, and I'll talk about that briefly here. The only thing that changes in those first three parts are the chords that you're going to play at the end of each piece there. And of course, that fourth little riff there, we do something a little different, and I'll tell you why we do that. Let's talk about the galloping real quick here. So if you're not familiar with that, and if you're not new to this, please bear with me just for about 20 seconds here. I want to explain this real quick for anyone who's new with the galloping technique. It's just a very quick and snappy alternate pick. 1, 2, 3. Okay, just a three-part pick, and it's a very tight sound, which what I'm doing here, and this applies to all the galloping parts throughout this lesson, okay? What I'm doing here is I'm just galloping that open E string with a palm mute. That's all I'm doing, and again, that's to get that very tight sound. If I were to gallop the entire power chord, which is the E power chord, we're in standard tuning by the way, it would sound like this. Now that sounds really cool, it sounds really awesome, but for this particular riff, because we've got a lot of movement in between the gallops, we actually do a downstroke between, which I'll cover here. I prefer the sound of just that one string, that one E string, okay, palm muted. That gives you a little bit tighter sound. Don't be afraid, though, to venture outside of what I'm sharing with you and maybe do some different things with it. I always encourage that. So if you want to gallop that whole power chord, hey, feel free to do so. You know, this is really turning into your riff. That's what I want it to be. Now, real quick, you may say, well, Jason, it kind of looks like you're galloping the power chord because you've got your hand in that position for the E power chord there. I keep it in that position because that's naturally what I would play, so it's just easier for me to gallop with my hand already in that position, even though I'm not playing that second note, if that makes sense. Now, one other tip real quick, if I want to stop the gallop, like that string noise that comes from that gallop, then I can quickly use this hand that's already in that position there to hover over the strings to silence them like this. So that's just something to know for future when you're playing riffs. It's always good to have your hands in position to stop things when they need to stop, when there's going to be string noise, and that's not what you're going for. Let's get into the actual lesson here. I didn't mean to spend so much time on the galloping and all that stuff, but I like to share these little tips with you, these little nuances that I come across, and sometimes I don't think about them until I actually sit down to share this with you guys. I'm like, yeah, I think this is helpful for you to know. So, hey, leave me a thumbs up, and of course, subscribe if you're not subscribed yet, but leave me a comment. Let me know if these little things are helpful to you. I know some of you might be saying, Jason, just get on with the lesson, dude. We're getting there. So let's start out with that the first part of this riff here. Okay, let me just play that through one time. what we're doing is basically 2 gallops with a downstroke in the middle, okay? That's it. Gallop, downstroke, gallop. That's the first part of what you just heard. Then there's another downstroke before we go to the power chord, which is just a C power chord. So to make this easy, actually for the next 2 lessons after this, or the next 2 parts, it's going to be the same thing. All that's going to change is the power chord. So those will be easy. But let's go through this again. So we're galloping again. That E string, we've got a palm mute there. Okay, I'm doing the gallop 1, 2, 3. That's an alternate pick. 1 down, 2 up, 3 down. Then I'm doing another downstroke. Okay, right there. But that's not really part of the gallop, if that makes sense. The gallop is 1, 2, 3, okay? Then I'm doing a downstroke kind of on its own. I like to separate those in my mind so that it kind of helps me when I'm actually performing that. So hopefully that makes sense to you. And then I do the exact same thing. And then finally we'll land on that C power chord. So let's go through that one more time. Alright, so now let's move on to the next part of the riff, which is part 2. Now the cool thing about this is it's very similar, and even the chord that we're going to land on is very similar. We're just kind of altering that chord, playing what I call a variation of the power chord. And to me, this just makes the power chord just sound really edgy and almost kind of wicked sounding. So let me play that part for you, and then we'll kind of talk through it. Same thing as before, gallop, downstroke, gallop. Remember the gallops, 1, 2, 3, downstroke, gallop again, 1, 2, 3, downstroke. Then we land on this really killer sounding power chord. So like your regular power chord, right? Your C power chord. I'm just assuming you guys know what that is. Your C power chord is the A and D string, frets 3 and 5. What we're doing here is we're playing frets 3 and 4. Okay, so that's technically I think that's the 4th note of that chord, of the C chord. Normally your power chord is your root note and your 5th note, so here it's root and 4th, right? So we're playing this. Again, really wicked sound. On that note, no pun intended, let's move on to the 3rd part of this melodic galloping metal riff. So let's just play that for you real quick here. Once again, same thing. Gallop, 1, 2, 3, downstroke. Gallop, 1, 2, 3, downstroke. Then we're playing a G power chord, although we're not playing the actual G power chord. Normally that would be the 1st and 2nd string, the E and A strings, frets 3 and 5, right? But we're not playing that. Basically, it's frets 3 and 2. So pretend you're playing like a regular G chord, and it's just those first 2 strings. That's what we're playing there. It's just a different way to play a power chord. That's really it. I mean, that's the simple explanation for it. You know, you don't have to play it that way, but it just kind of like changes everything, kind of changes the character, and it helps your riffs not sound so much like what I would call, I guess, stock metal riffs. It doesn't sound like everything else or anything else because you're integrating these different chords, these variation of power chords. So it's just something cool to have in your back pocket to just whip out and like, you know what, instead of playing a G, I'm going to play it like this, you know, and it just, I don't know, it just gives it that edge. All right, so here is the very last part of this riff here, okay, and this time we're going to do something a little different. We're not going to gallop. This is going to make it a little bit easier, but again, I'll tell you why I'm landing on this, ending with this, instead of ending with another galloping riff here, okay? about downstrokes here, and basically we're playing an F power chord, but again we're playing a variation of that F power chord. Again, just gives it, it's just a cool sound, which is why I call this the melodic galloping metal riff here. So we're palm muting the open E twice, kind of a real quick palm mute, downstrokes, and then we're going to the F, but we're not playing the F power chord, you know, with the root and the fifth note. We're playing the root and fourth note here, which that's the E and A string, frets 1 and 2. And again, if you're a Patreon supporter, I will be giving you the downloadable tabs for this lesson as well as the backing track. So I just wanted to remind you guys of that. This F power chord, we're playing frets 1 and 2 on the first 2 strings, the E and A string there. And then what I'm doing is I'm palm muting that F note once before playing the complete power chord, which is the root and the fifth note. I shouldn't say complete, but the regular power chord. So again, this is it. Let's go through the riff one more time. I played my LTD M1000 Deluxe for the full mix that you briefly heard at the very beginning of this video, that little intro clip there. But then I switched over for the lesson, I switched over to my Ibanez Prestige RG1570. Now, you could say, well, Jason, those are your guitars, you just like playing both, so that's why. Actually, there's a little bit more legitimate reason why I use both guitars, and I'll tell you why. But first, real quick, if you are a Patreon supporter, you have the backing tracks, the full mix, and the mix with just the bass and drums and the guitar tabs in the Patreon, on the Patreon page, my Patreon page. So make sure you go download those. If you're not a Patreon supporter, I do have a link in the description of this video. There's only one stupidly inexpensive tier level. I kept everything really simple for this, so if you'd like to join, it's kind of a no-brainer. If not, I'm not offended either way. It's there in the description of this video. I recorded that first clip with, again, my M1000 Deluxe here with active EMG pickups, EMG 81. It's sad that I don't even know what pickups are in this. It's just a curse. Anyway, so I recorded that little clip with this guitar using plugins, okay? Now, I switched over to my Ibanez RG1570 with passive pickups. These are the stock passive pickups. I actually had these changed out like a year ago. I ended up changing them back to the stock. There's a video up there if you guys want to catch that. Feel free to see that. It's an interesting story. But I used this for the lesson playing through my EVH amp. Here's what I have found in playing a guitar with active pickups and passive pickups. When I'm playing through plugins, right, which is what I was playing through with that first clip in the very beginning of this video. I was playing through Positive Grid's Bias Amp 2 and FX2, and of course I've got other plugins as well, and I've played through other plugins. I've downloaded so many demos like all of you guys have, but most every time my guitars with active pickups sound better through the plugins. Now I know you want to say, well Jason, duh, active pickups, metal, hello, of course it's going to sound better, but here's the thing. For the lessons, well, I switched over to my Ibanez Prestige RG1570 with passive stock pickups because I was playing through my EVH amp. And what I found, and this is just kind of over the past couple of years, I've begun to notice this more, is that I like the tone of this guitar, even with passive stock pickups going through my EVH, better than any other guitar that I own. I just prefer the tone, which again, when I'm playing this guitar with plugins or even some of the other like hardware units, it just doesn't have that sustain and that power and that punch that of course a guitar with active pickups has. But I prefer the tone of this with passive pickups playing through my EVH amp. And of course, I love playing through my EVH amp far better than any plugin. I use plugins because they're convenient, you know, but a lot of times I find myself playing through my amp, even at a lower volume. So I am not a salesperson or spokesperson or sponsored by EVH, but of course if they said, Jason, dude, we want to sponsor you, I'd be like, okay, do it. Do it. I don't know, it just kind of goes to show you that your guitars, you're going to prefer different guitars going through different output sources. And the reason why I'm sharing this is really no reason. It's just cool stuff to talk about, you know. If you think about it, this is just cool stuff to know. I mean, crap, I'd like to know, you know, what you guys think about your guitars and output sources. Do you experience that? Do you have some guitars that maybe have active pickups that sound better through one source, but then maybe a guitar with passive pickups sounds better than your active pickup guitar through a different source, an amp or plugin or whatever it may be? So I'd like to know that. Leave those in the comments if you care to share. It's just neat stuff to think about and to talk about, and it kind of acts as a helpful guide as to, you have to, I guess, determine what's your core output source, right? Like, what's your main output source? Like, yeah, I use plugins a lot in the studio, again, because it's very convenient, especially for doing videos like this. But if I'm recording, like if I'm going to record an album or project, or if I'm going to go play out metal somewhere, oh, I'm taking that EVH amp, or I'm going to mic it up in the studio here. And for that, I prefer my Ibanez with passive pickups over my LTD with active pickups. Kind of weird. But anyway, I just wanted to share that real quick. So as we're wrapping up here, don't forget the Patreon links in the description of this YouTube video here. Also, if you don't have my free metal guitar practice guide, which is kind of turned into like a mini course, there's downloadable tabs for that. Sign up for that. There's a link in the description of the video for that as well. If you already have that, then of course your next step is my Metal Riff Master guitar course, my premium guitar course. I just released that April of this year of 2021. So there's a link for all of that stuff in the description of this YouTube video. And guys, I hope this lesson helped you. I hope you got a lot out of this lesson. I appreciate your support on my channel here. Please make sure you like this video. If you're not subscribed, of course, go ahead and subscribe. And I will see you on the next video. As always, keep it metal.